Russia's Sputnik V vaccine is more than 91% effective against COVID-19. The news was published Tuesday in The Lancet, a British medical journal. This is great news for all the countries already administering the vaccine and all those looking for alternative supplies.
It's
unconditionally an epoch-making event. There are 4 vaccines in the world which published what's called the third phase of trials. Our vaccine is among the 3 most effective vaccines in the world.
After the announcement, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said every vaccine is welcome in the European Union. The bloc's vaccine rollout is lagging behind the UK and the US, and desperate and disappointed member states, including Hungary, are looking elsewhere for supplies.
The centralised vaccine procurement of Brussels has failed. This is risking the lives of Europeans and the quick relaunching of the European economy. That's why we have looked for new sources of supply. We were the first, but it is unlikely that we will be the only ones in the European Union in this effort.
Armenia, Belarus and Serbia have already got Sputnik V. European countries which are not EU members and say they were losing out waiting for the COVAX programme, which was supposed to make vaccines available to everyone, to deliver. Countries hard hit by Western sanctions have also approved Sputnik V. Venezuela has already received its first shipment, and Iran's first batch is expected any day now. Russia has donated 5,000 doses to the Palestinians in the occupied territories as well. The World Health Organization says to end the COVID-19 pandemic, it has to be ended for everyone, everywhere. Nonetheless, rich countries are hoarding and rolling out vaccines, while the least developed nations watch and wait. It may take years for the poorest to get the jab. Bianca Rahimi, Press TV, London.
And for his thoughts on this emotive issue, Ranjeet Brar, NHS consultant, physician and surgeon, is with us. Good to have you, as always, Dr. Brar. Now, from a medical perspective, is there anything significantly that differentiates the Russian vaccine to some of the other ones we're more used to in the West?
Thanks, Amina. Lovely to be back with you. I think this is great news. It's very inspiring news every time we see that a new vaccine. There was good news from the AstraZeneca vaccine today that it seems to be more efficacious than we thought. But what's slightly different about the Sputnik V vaccine is its platform. So all of the different vaccines have to deliver essentially some part of the viral particle. They're overwhelmingly going for the spike protein to the immune system so that the immune system can generate a response to it. The Russian Gamaleya Institute has a lot of experience with the Ebola vaccine, and it's used essentially the same platform, which is a human adenovirus vector. So essentially a cold is used, a cold which doesn't give you many symptoms, is used to deliver that particle to the body. And what's different about the Russian vaccine and makes it particularly more efficacious than the AstraZeneca, which uses a similar technology, but a chimpanzee adenovirus vector, is that it uses 2 separate colds, one for the initial dose, and for the second dose, which is taken 3 weeks later, it uses a slightly different vector. And the justification for that is that so you don't develop an immune reaction to the vector giving you the second booster dose. And that probably is responsible. And the scientists of the Gamaleya Institute were quick to spot that theirs was slightly more efficacious than the AstraZeneca vaccine, hence their collaboration in trying to improve the AstraZeneca vaccine. That probably is responsible for its greater degree of efficacy, slightly different to the RNA vaccines from the Pfizer and the Moderna model.
Now, we all remember perhaps discussing this back in August when Russia said, hey, we think we've got something here. But the EU were slow about procuring this. And now we see that they're struggling to acquire enough vaccines. Is this another case here of misplaced Russophobia where we discount the science because, well, the politics is as it was?
There's a strong element of that, Amina. Of course, all of these vaccines were developed at an accelerated rate. The NATO countries, the EU, Canada, Australia, Britain, have all very much gone for the large pharmaceutical companies, their own pharmaceutical companies, and have given huge amounts of money both to develop them, actually they've been hugely state funded and subsidized, and to promise them contracts to procure them. And then, of course, they've essentially supported their own industry and themselves and have looked to those preferentially. We in Britain have had a task force which has done precisely that. We have studiously ignored the Russian vaccine and the Chinese vaccines. We've said that their science was in some way suspect. In fact, that's not the case. They have been just as transparent, probably developed quicker, probably more efficacious than our own, certainly cheaper, have certain advantages in terms of the temperature at which they can be stored. So they're clearly good vaccines. The latest Lancet publication, the phase 3 trial of this, which involved 20,000 participants, has shown excellent results with greater than 90% efficacy. It's cheap, easy to store, and will be available to a range of countries who essentially are, as your program has already pointed out, outside the remit of the NATO countries' distribution program. Certainly, when there's at the moment in the world, an overall deficiency of vaccines.
Before I let you go, I have to ask you about this idea now that procurement of these vaccines has become incredibly political, with a lot of these smaller countries being forced out, Dr. Brar.
I'm afraid that we live in a world which is incredibly polarized, where there's incredible disparity of wealth between rich and poor, even within the richest countries on earth. We've seen the way that has interacted with and exacerbated the effects of this pandemic, but also brought home to people just how the vast masses of the world are disenfranchised economically. That's within the richest nations, but it's certainly between the richest nations and the poorest nations. And I'm afraid this is, again, both in terms of medicine, both in terms of overall healthcare, both in terms of ventilators, PPE. We've seen this roll out throughout the pandemic. I'm afraid we haven't seen the full impact of this pandemic on the poorest countries, and it's certainly the case of the most wealthy countries having now, got this weapon in their arsenal where they had failed economically to really support their population. They will be able to use this as an effective weapon against the pandemic. They very much will be the first to be the beneficiaries of that. And again, I'm afraid we're going to see another wave of discrimination towards the most poor communities and the most poor nations on earth. And that is a reflection of the unjust economic society and the unstable world in which we currently live, Amina.
Thank you very much, Ranjeet Brar.